All right. Hello, everyone. Today we're joined by a special guest from Italy, Diego, who is going to be discussing Italian firearms culture and give us a picture into some of the framework of firearms laws over in Italy. And Diego, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So, I am Diego. I'm an Italian firearm collector with a special attention to our Carcano rifles and many other military surplus mostly. But yeah, I'm getting really interested in Carcanos, and yeah, we have some good discussions with Anderson with the Garangay along the years. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, you kind of jumped into kind of your collecting interest, but yeah, tell us what kind of firearms you personally collect and own. I know you're a big into Carcanos, but you're also into kind of generally collecting firearms altogether.
Yeah, along the years, I collected everything I could gather. I started, of course, with I just want to get into military surplus, so I have to get a Mauser kind of Car 98, and of course, I went and got a Car 98. Then I saw, absolutely want an FAL, so I went and bought a British L1A1. Um, and then just kept on gathering various meal sorts. I just I went for the cheap stuff because I'm not really a rich person, but I try to get the best deals out there. I try to get the right person, the right deals, and so I gathered several good firearms, historical firearms along the years. I tried my best, and of course, I had to get all the accessories, all the history behind it,
Of course.
and the care canals, of course, they're they're fulfilling my life and my space. Literally my
Yeah,
living space.
you've got a nice M91 behind you, and of
Yeah,
course, commendable hat collection. So
yeah. Reenacting have yeah. Also, between many things, I also try to invest my money into reenacting that by itself is quite expensive and quite money drawing. Yeah, but
yeah,
I have a degree in history, so I guess that
it's helpful.
it takes its toll.
Yeah, well, with that being said, you mentioned that you have an FN FAL, so how would you describe, the general attitude towards firearms in Italy? Is gun ownership common amongst civilians? Is it, how does the public view firearms ownership? I think one of the attitudes that a lot of American has, especially with most of my audience being Americans, is that you really can't own a lot of firearms in Europe. Especially when we think of the United Kingdom as sort of like the base model for what you can own in Europe, which is like an over under or side by side shotgun. But obviously, you can just sounds like you can own semi automatics in Italy. Tell us a little bit about the perception there and how civilians kind of gear themselves towards that.
So yeah, the perception is quite similar to the US for some aspects because we have a good history of firearm ownership because we are a pretty rural country. Like every household used to have some kind of shotguns, some kind of defense weapons, especially in the countryside. So you have all the time people bringing shotguns, old muskets to the police because it was grandpa's shotgun. I don't want it anymore. So here you are. So Italian houses really are plenty of firearms, especially the countryside ones. Of course, in the middle of cities, we're getting scarcer and scarcer firearms, both historically and on the perceptual level. So historically, we have a good appreciation of firearms. Historically, we have as a, how could I say it? Um, we used to have a good perception of firearms in Italy, but of course, with modernization, with urbanization, that went down the drain because uh, cities tend to have a more
Restrictive firearms views.
yeah, tend to have less use of firearms, tend to have a more sophisticated society that doesn't need the violence of firearms. So you'll see more uh, rich people, more evolved people that will discard the firearms as something of the grandpa that doesn't need anymore and that it's just some form of violence. And then, of course, we'll have the modern view of firearms that the US bring to the rest of the world that complicates stuff around. So uh, to
I guess is it
to
that like in the US it's very similar with like a rural versus urban divide on like the views of civilian firearms ownership, but even in urban areas in the United States, like handgun ownership is still, very prevalent. I guess with Italy, I don't know if you're in a rural or a more urbanized area, or maybe you're in a suburban area. But
I
you were
mean,
talking about the perception of, hey, grandpa owns like a shotgun, but it sounds like you can own like if you're saying you can own an FN foul, that is in several states in the United States, you cannot even own that sort of weapon. So is there kind of like a more of a you can own it, but no one really kind of touts it, or is it more just like I know we're going to get into some of the legal kind of classifications of different firearms here in a minute, but if you had a neighbor that knew you had an FN foul, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know this is legal in my country."
yeah, there is a lot of, there are a lot of misconception around here, as you would have in a urbanized area in the United States. Like, oh, um, there is a lot of misconception as the United States can have all the guns. They can buy machine guns at supermarkets, the kind of peddler, and meanwhile nobody realizes that I can literally buy an AR-15 and bring it home with no issues. But misconceptions and internet laws and propaganda. It's really, really, really similar to the United States, mostly because the talking points in the United States mostly come back to Europe just for propaganda,
Sure, sure.
mostly, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a bit complicated and it's really, really influentiated, yeah,
Yeah, influencing.
influenced by the US talking points, especially after Columbine. Yeah, it really hit here too. But it was already the Italian gun culture was already declining because of several other issues, and
But
mostly because the yeah
but it sounds like it does sound like based on what you're saying, there's like a robust culture of like farmers that do either like pest control, sporting shotguns, rifle ranges. It sounds like there's a pretty robust gun culture in maybe the rural part of Italy.
there used to be a strong gun culture in the rural part of Italy because there were plenty of hunters, of bird hunters, boar hunters, deer hunters, all kind of hunters, and the hunting groups, the hunting societies are really, really, really declining right now. Nobody wants to go hunting anymore, except if you have your grandpa, your father that are out there hunting, because hunting licenses cost a lot, hunting courses cost a lot, and it's quite expensive to go out hunting, and it's quite mm, time draining.
Sure.
It's it's something you have to do. It's something on the decline, surely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was also a strong gun range culture that started at the beginning of the 1900s, at the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, with the Tiro Segno Nazionale. That was basically our equivalent of the CMP, Civilian Marksmanship Program, just for Italy, yeah. And it was really, really, really incentivized by the state, both before the First World War, and then of course after, during fascism. It was really incentivized for the people to go out, take practice to shoot, and be a good soldier, be a good marksman, the kind of stuff. Then of course after the Second World War, talking about being a good soldier, being a good marksman, it was more disputable.
Right.
It was complicated.
And I guess
So,
there was probably a shift, at least in most European countries, of like a smaller, more organized military versus, the culture of like the everyman is, a rifleman sort of mentality. Because we had that in the United States too, where in the after the American Civil War, there was a big emphasis on the civilian population learning how to shoot rifles. Obviously, we were a frontier country, so there was a lot of emphasis on marksmanship, especially with major drafts in World War I and World War II. So it was in the best interest of the government to like subsidize civilian marksmanship. And really, after the Second World War, there was still some of that, just because of the United States being a military power, but uh, that culture has also kind of gone away on our end as well. There's still some of it, but it's not like subsidized by the government, right? I know there's some places like in Switzerland and a few other countries in Europe that still have sort of that universal military sort of culture, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I think with that being said, I would love to hear from you about, what are like let's say I just turned 18 in Italy and I'm a citizen. What is basically the easiest kind of firearm to attain versus maybe the hardest, right? And so like thinking shotguns, rifles, up to semi-automatics, assault rifles, even machine guns. So kind of walk us through that legal framework for.
so initially, it's actually quite easy to get all of them at the same time, because you have to get the basic gun license, that is basically the for sporting purposes gun license, and that will open the doors for everything you want basically. So you are 18, you want to get a firearm, you go to your doctor first and you ask to your doctor, hey, can I get a firearm license? And the doctor check your mm, medical sheet, your your past medical issues. Do you have mental issues? No. Do you take any mental uh, drugs? No. Do you take drugs? No. Are you addicted to something? No. All right. You can go to another doctor, this time a state doctor, uh, that checks basically that all the things that your doctor said are true, and have a little chat with you about whatever, just to check that you're how can I say it?
Yeah, just mentally
Visu-
and
yeah, visually saying you are a normal person, that you can have a normal conversation with another person. Just then he checks your eyesight, he checks your ear, he just checks that you're in a good physical state and good mental state to get a firearm. It really is an easy check, but you have to get a mandatory check from a state doctor, and that's it. Then, with this certificate from the state doctor, you can go to a national range, again, the Tiro Segno Nazionale, our civilian marksmanship program ranges, and you get a firearm, uh, how can I say it? Firearm handling course,
okay.
just how to handle a gun, how to basic safety on a gun, and and a couple of days of shooting just to get a hold of a 9mm and a 22 light round firearm. Just the
Safety,
basics,
basically, is what that. Yeah.
basic safety course that you can actually skip if you were drafted in the army until 2003, if I remember correctly. You could have drafted, and you have the basic military course. And if you were drafted, you don't need to go to the national shooting range and get a course because you already did a firearm handling
Right.
course. So, and then with the firearm handling course certificate, you go to the police, and the police check your criminal records and say, "Oh, you don't have criminal records. You get out with the right people," because the Italian police also have a record of who did we check. Sometimes there are checkpoints with police, and in station, in train stations, or just along the roads. And if they find you with a person with a bad criminal record, you're going to have it on your criminal record.
Right.
You were out with a known felon, so you're going to have some troubles. So if the police doesn't find you were with some felons and find that you have a clean criminal record, they're going to release you your firearm license. And finally, with your firearm license that took you only a month, 2 months to get, about 2 months overall, and that will last for 5 years, you can go to whatever firearm shop, gun shop, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever
Good.
gun shop, or from whatever private owner, and get your firearm. You can get hunting rifles, you can get an AR-15, you can get a Kalashnikov, you can get whatever you want as long as it is semi-auto only and under the 50 BMG caliber. We
So,
have,
so
yeah,
you turn 18, you go to a doctor, you get
yeah,
basically a mental check, a physical check. You go to your police department, which I assume you can go to like your local police department, like in
yeah,
your
local.
municipality. And then of course you have to get your safety course. Is there like a nationally recognized like safety course, or is it kind of like, oh, your local gun club has, they do their own safety course, and the police department just accepts it?
The local gun club is must be federated, must be part of the bigger national association. So they have guidelines, they have basic guidelines, but everyone will have its own safety course. But they are really, really similar overall. I
Okay.
heard somebody else had really small differences, but really, really small between nothing exceptional. Someone will have you use a shotgun, someone will have you shoot a 22, just basic handling course of a rifle, shotguns, and pistol. Nothing terrible.
So now that you go into your gun shop, you pick out what you want to buy. So all those items you just mentioned, so it sounds like bolt action rifle, semi-automatic rifles, I don't know, remember if you mentioned handguns being under that
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
You can all own those. You get those three things: police approval, medical examination, and then your safety course. And you can pretty much own the majority of weapons that I guess a civilian could probably own in an average state in the United States. Are there are there like different classifications? Is it like, oh, those firearms are in like class A and then class B is something else? And this is a maybe a two-tiered question, but are you given like do you have to register those firearms, and is there any licensing requirements? It's like, oh, I have to apply for a license and I can put all these firearms in a license, or does Italy not have any licensing schemes?
No, we don't have any licenses, but once you have the gun license, you can buy all the guns you want, but you need to register them. All
Okay.
the guns I own are registered. So yes, that's the big that's the big deal. You have to register to the police all the guns you own. When you buy from a private person, you have to sign up a piece of paper saying this person is giving this gun to this person with this much ammo. So everything is really really controlled, really tightened. You know, and we have 3 days to make this registration once we have the firearm in our hands. But it's not really a big deal. We just notify the police. Oh, I had this deal. Nobody is going really to argue about it. You are fine with your gun license, no issue. You can get all the firearms you want. If you get too much firearms, the police may not they'll never ask why, but they'll ask you to have a decent safety systems around because we don't really have safety requirements to own firearms, but the law say that we have to diligently preserve them from childs, mental people with mental issues, and thieves, of course. So if the police see that you have 20 firearms, 40 firearms, they're going to ask, where are you storing these firearms? Are they just like laying around, or are they in a safe or something like that? Do you have an alarm on your house? Do you have some safety system, bars on your windows, or something like that?
So it's a
They
little
may ask.
subjective, it sounds like.
So what?
It sounds like it's a little bit subjective.
Yeah,
It's kind
it's
of like
really
do a common sense check on some of those things.
it's really subjective because there are stricter local police departments that will check your house every once in a while. There are absolutely lax police departments because they are overburdened by their own work to do. So they will never check your house. It really depends on the situation of your local police department.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I guess also another question is like when you go in to purchase a firearm, is there do they have to run like a background check? So in the US we have like a form 4473 where it's you have to fill out some paperwork and they run a scan through the state and then just make sure you don't have a criminal record. So, you kind of walk in, you've got your license. It sounds like in Italy, and you say, "Hey, I want to buy a Carcano," um, and they're like, "Okay, here you go." You inspect it. You say, "Hey, I want to purchase this." Do they then run it through like a computer or anything, or are you pretty much all set?
you're all set. You just gave
Okay,
them a still valid gun license. They see that it's still valid, so they'll just have you they'll just give you whatever you want without issues, without question asked, and they'll just hope that the police have their shit together and regularly check that you aren't a felon, because well, the real issue here is that if you get in a confrontation in a rest in a violent confrontation with someone, if
sure.
you threaten someone, the police may be notified by this, and they may get to your door and say, "Good morning. We are here to take all your firearms away, just for safety,
Sure.
and to take away your gun license because you threatened someone, you hit someone, you're not safe to we're not safe to you holding guns or something like that." So yeah,
Okay.
it really is a privilege here to own firearms, and you really have to be a law-abiding citizen at all times and to avoid confrontations the best you can.
No, that's interesting. And I guess the other question too is so it sounds like police inspections, it's kind of just you know if they want to, let's say that you got into a fist fight at a local bar and there was some sort of injury and they come to your house, um that would do they need like a do they need any sort of warrant, or is it sort of like, hey, we're going to revoke your license, we've made that sort of uniform decision? And sorry
They
about it, you can reapply in 5 years or something like that.
they don't really need a warrant because in Italy we need a warrant to get into houses. We need a warrant to get into your stuff, to get into your bags or everything or whatever. But if the policemen suspect that in the firearm in the house or in the bag there may be drugs or firearms, he doesn't need a warrant because, oh, I know for sure there is a firearm or drugs, so I can inspect it. You're a legal gun owner. They know there are guns in your house.
Sure.
You did some shitty stuff, so they're going to get your guns. Sometimes around here there are WhatsApp groups that are intercepted by the police because they say incredibly stupid things on the internet, and they just go to their house and, guys, you told incredibly stupid stuff on the internet, so we're getting all your accounts away because you're a moron. You know,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
What about going back to sort of like the different classifications of what you can legally own? So you said those are police rifle, bolt action rifles, semi-automatic rifles, handguns are all good under those three requirements. You said at 18 you can own those. I don't know if there's like you have to be 21 to own handguns or if there's any sort of requirement on that end. What
Yeah.
about things? Do you guys have like an antique classification? Like in the United States, we have anything made prior to 1899. The federal government does not regulate those arms at all. They're not even considered arms by the government, so you can freely trade those without any sort of uh, background check.
So we did used to have the antique firearms. Um, it was really useful because it is still a thing today, but today we need to also sort of register firearms. It's a bit complicated. It's a bit of a gray area because antique firearms here are before 1890. Those are considered antique firearms, but we need to register some and
Okay.
not register some, but anyway, you need to have again handling course to own some kind of antique firearms because the police anyway want you to know how to handle a firearm for such things. And it was especially useful because 18th century reenactors used to have all kind of antique firearms and went on doing reenactment, and sometimes accident happened, so it was a little bit complicated. So the police and the government tightened it a little bit, but it's muddy. It's a bit of a gray area. I really need to check the antique law, but we have the antique definition, yeah,
Okay.
and it's a little bit more lax
Yeah.
compared to regular firearms. So all firearms made after 1890 said we have three main classification that are hunting firearms, that are basically all bolt actions, and all semi-automatic rifles that don't have military features like bayonet lugs or
Sure.
a combination of bayonet lugs. As you know, it's really similar to the ATF definition of military feature firearms. So you can have a
Grip,
Garand,
muzzle thread, and
yeah,
bayonet lug and all that kind of stuff.
a combination of two or more of these military features. So you can have a Garand that is classified as hunting rifle, the Ljungman, the AG-42, the Swedish semi-auto, is is a hunting rifle.
Sure.
It's classified as a hunting rifle, despite having a bayonet lug and everything. But if you have the bayonet lug and the pistol grip and removable magazine, it's a bit more complicated, and it's also an hunting rifle. Then we have the common guns. We have basically all the guns we own are common guns, but hunting rifles are common guns for hunting purposes, and we have the other classification that I'll talk about later, is sporting guns. But basically, all of our guns are common guns with some exceptions. But in the we can own only 3 common guns, but it's more complicated than this. So basically, this pistol, this is a common gun. I keep repeating common, but it's not real English counterpart, but we really call it comune. This is a common gun.
Sure.
This is a regular gun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can own only 3 pistols that have these kind of features. Only 3 of them. Then you can own literally infinite hunting common guns. And you can own up to 12 sporting purposes common guns. I don't know if it was clear enough because it's muddy and complicated too.
So when you're yeah, I want to refocus on that. When you're going in to, let's say that you already own 3 common guns and you want to go into a store, is it kind of on you to know what you already own? I assume because there's no um there's registration, but it sounds like the shop owner is not going to know, or if it's a private transaction, they're not going to know what you already own. So it's kind of on you to follow the law. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They don't know what you have, and you have to know both what you already own and what you're going to buy, because you have to know the exact classification of the gun you're going to buy. For example, incredibly stupid examples. Do you know? Well, you know the Carcano, the small Carcano, the allievi tiratori.
Yep.
It is basically the long version of the Balilla carbine,
Right.
and it's that one, as far as I know, is a common gun, and you can't put it neither in the hunting rifles nor in the sporting rifles. That is considered exactly as a pistol or as a demilitarized. A former full auto is considered. And it's
It demilled or
just
deactivated, I
the
guess.
mill,
Yeah.
just not the mill,
Demilled, yeah.
the mill, and but it is a bolt action, and it is a really small caliber. But since you can't use it for sporting, nor you can't use it for hunting because it is a really small caliber, it is a common gun.
So what would an AR-15 be? Would that be considered a sporting rifle or a sporting gun? Or I guess it depends, right?
It depends because, for example, I have here my uh, military police, so the Smith & Wesson, the extra cheap AR-15, easy peasy. This
Right.
is a sporting rifle, sporting purposes rifle,
And you can own 12
and
of those, right? And
I can own up to 12 this,
up to
yes.
12, yeah.
But for example, the Mild M16, it actually is a common gun because it was a former full auto turned to semi-auto, so you can own only 3 of them officially.
Oh, it's considered a common.
Yeah, that is considered a common. So to sum it up, to summarize it, all guns are common, so you can own only 3 guns that aren't in the hunting section nor in the sporting section. It is more easy peasy to
Could you
explain.
does the Italian state, do they define what a sporting or a hunting gun is? Like if I came and said, "Oh yeah, I want I want an AK-47," I would have to did they say, "Okay, that is a sporting rifle because you can do, you can take it to the range, you can do 3-gun matches with it, you can do competitions with it? Or would they say it's a common gun, or would they say, oh, if it doesn't fit in a hunting or a sporting category, it is a common gun and you can only own 3 of them? I think that that makes sense. All guns are common guns, and you can only own 3 of them if they don't fit into a hunting or sporting category. So it would be hard for you to go in and prove that your Beretta pistol is not a hunting or sporting gun. Is that right?
Yeah, but the the real issue and solution for this purpose, for this struggle, it is that we have a state defined classification. We
Okay.
have our proof house in Gardone Valtrompia. There is our CIP proof house, our officially proof house, that every single gun new imported or produced have to go through it to get proof tested, and they classified every single model of gun available on the market, and the the manufacturer or the importer of the firearm have to say this one is a sporting gun because it has these features, and so it can be a sporting gun. This gun has the hunting gun feature, so this is a hunting gun. And of course, a gun being sporting or for hunting purposes will have a high market value because more people will get it.
So
Sorry.
what about like so you're collecting Carcanos, like what category would that be under? So obviously you've got a lot of collectors that you were mentioning, reenactors having historical rifles and historical firearms, black powder, antiques. Do those go under a sporting or hunting category?
It all depends. It all depends. But mostly bolt action rifles are hunting rifles, so you're in
Okay.
peace with it. Because
Okay.
hunting rifles basically is all bolt actions over 22 LR, so it's
So
pretty easy to have.
all bolt actions are hunting rifles.
Most bolt actions are hunting rifles because, for example, as I said, 22 long rifle bolt actions are actually either sporting rifles
Okay.
or are common guns because, yeah, classifications.
So can you own, you said that there's, for common guns it's a limit of 3, for sporting rifles it's a limit of 12. For hunting rifles, is there a limit on hunting rifles, or it's just one?
There's no limit on hunting rifles.
Okay.
That's the special loophole we have because, of course, when these classifications were made, people just imploded because they had huge collections of over under double barrel bolt actions and just didn't want to give up all of that. So the hunting rifles had a special classification just to be limitless, how
Ah,
many you want.
okay, no, that clarifies things a lot. So it sounds like it, but at the end of the day, it's on you as the owner of those to know, uh, that you're not exceeding your limits in each of those categories. So
And
yeah,
yeah, if
the
you go
police
to the
find you,
police,
if the police find you owning, let's say, 4 common guns that don't fit into a hunting or sporting purpose, your license gets revoked and they take your collection.
not really revoked, but they're going to notify you that, oh, you can't buy this gun. You have
Okay.
to take it back because this transaction wasn't valid because you can't own it. Just
And
like that.
is the previous owner obligated to take it back? Let's say you buy okay, so they would
I
have
don't
to.
really know. I don't really know. I never tried that. Probably nobody tried that. But
Okay.
yeah, most probably the old owner must take it back because he couldn't have done that transaction because the buyer was wrong to buy it. So it should have known better. This kind of stuff. Yeah, you know.
Sure.
It's annoying. It's really annoying, but that's slow, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's and
And
what about things like ammo storage requirements or even like bladed weapons like swords and bayonets? Is there any special rules, or is that a whole different ball game?
yeah, it's a bit complicated because we can own we can store in our house up to 1,500 rounds of hunting purposes bullets
Okay.
cartridges. So everything that goes into an hunting rifle up to 1,500 cartridges with no issues. You can own up to 4 kilos pow- mm, of smokeless powder,
Okay.
and for hand loading purposes, of course. Uh,
What about
it's a
black
bit complicated.
powder?
Yeah, black powder is into the 4 kilos. You can own 4 kilos of powder.
Okay.
Don't care of if smokeless or black powder, as far as I know.
Sure.
I don't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is control. It is
A controlled substance, basically.
yeah, it's a controlled substance too, and mm, then you can own up to 200 uh, pistol rounds, common guns rounds. So 22 LR, you can own up only 200 rounds between 9 millimeter to 22 LR, uh,
What
45 SCP.
is the 22 LR? I mean, if you have a pistol that's under like a sporting under the sporting classification, it sounds like that can count towards your 1200 or 1500. I can't remember what you had said. Count,
200.
or is it only those guns you have that are like, what if you have a common gun or a sporting and a hunting gun that share the same caliber? Is it
Common. So it's a bit complicated because common and sporting are both in the 200 top group. You
okay?
can own only 200 rounds of common or sporting, and
Okay.
you can own up to 1,500 of hunting purposes rounds. If you have hunting purposes AK derivative, you know, those weird semi-auto AKs with the long stock and, you know, those kind of AK derivatives, or any kind of bolt action with in 7.62 for 39, you can own up to 1,500 rounds of 7.62 for 39, even if you have a common AK-47 in the common section.
Okay,
You
so
have,
I think that clarifies that question then.
but you have to just justify the 1,500 7.62 for 39. You can't have the common AK-47, but not any hunting rifle in a 7.62 for 39. You know,
Sure.
it, I don't know if I was enough clear about that.
No, that made sense. And so would for example, your AR-15, you said it was a Smith and Wesson,
Yeah,
uh, is that that would be considered a common gun in Italy, or is that a sporting gun?
it is a sporting, this one,
Okay. How did that
because it,
and so that was just that the classification was made by the government for it's kind of hard to understand how they made that classification.
so they followed both European guidelines
Okay.
developed along the decades, but also we have previously previously approved laws that said, "Oh, these are the military features that are a no-no. So
Okay.
these these are illegal. These are common guns. These are there are there are some requirements, but they are a bit complicated to explain in a single session. So,
Yeah, yeah. No,
but
that makes sense. Okay, so the ammo requirements make sense. So it sounds like for your Beretta, you can only have several hundred rounds of 9 millimeter. unless you had another hunting or sporting rifle that was chambered at 9 millimeter that also had was using the same caliber. But it doesn't sound
Mm.
like that. You would have to justify that. So you go to the range with basically you're limited to basically two boxes of commercial 9 millimeter.
So first thing, you cannot own a hunting rifle in 9 millimeter. There
Okay,
is no
it's
such
just
thing.
considered a pistol if it at that point.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
It is considered a common gun because the caliber you don't go hunting boars with a 9 millimeter, so that's not a hunting caliber.
sure.
Don't even think about it or shit like that.
Sure.
Um, but also you can buy a million 9 millimeter rounds. You cannot store them in your house, but you can buy them, and you can shoot all day long. You can shoot 9 millimeters for all day long. You can shoot a million rounds with no issues. You do have a 9 millimeter machine gun. You can, well, you don't have one, but you can
Yeah.
buy a million rounds and shoot them at the range because as long as you don't store them, you can buy all the ammo you want at the gun shop and then go to the range or even buy them
Yeah.
at the range and shoot them
So in
with no issue.
theory, I could go to a gun shop and buy, 15,000 rounds of 9 millimeter, take it to the range, and as long as I'm using all that ammunition except for 200 rounds that I can take back home for my own personal, that's totally within the framework of the law. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So we've got common guns, sporting guns, hunting rifles, and of course, I'm thinking of like a Venn diagram where they're all common guns, but then you kind of have these two circles drawn out in the middle. What about restricted firearms like um I, machine guns or guns that would be very difficult for a civilian to own?
So here I have to tell you that I told you a lie, but not really. So uh, I own four common firearms. I
Okay.
own four pistols. That's more than three, and that's because I have a special license that is the collecting license. You can have uh, a collecting common guns as licenza di collezione di armi comune. So common gun collecting license
Okay.
that basically you have to obtain from your local police department,
And
from
that's
your
what we were
local
talking about at the beginning, right? Is sort of
yeah.
your basic license.
No, that's an extra one.
Okay.
I have an extra license just to own more than three common guns.
Okay.
It's
So
an extra license. It's a
so you
bit
said it was
complicated.
so that's so there's the you said so the lowest thing is a common license, right? That's like your base
The sporting license is
of
the
the
basic
sporting
one.
license.
Then you can have a hunting license that is only strictly for those who need to go hunting and test the firearms on the range every once in a while. But mostly we go with the sporting license. Then there is the hunting license, and then there is the self-defense license. But nobody gets that except people in really mm, specific positions like judges, politicians, jewelers,
Sure.
bankers, people who have to
Security firms,
defense,
I imagine. Yeah.
yeah, security guards. They can have the self-defense license, but we we peasants we don't have that. No,
So on the
and
so on the hunting license, can you own any so the hunting license can you get sporting firearms on a hunting license?
I don't really know that, but I think
Okay.
you cannot. I never checked that because it's a, as I said, it's a really niche
Sure.
license that is getting fewer and fewer people to get it. So I never checked that. I don't think that you can have sporting guns with the hunting license. I
Now
have to check that.
which license can I own the three common guns? When's that three common gun limit? Is that on
This
any of those?
It's on all of them, but
Okay.
mostly on the common with the sporting license. It's the most common because you can own everything you want with no issues, no
Okay.
question asked. So
But
that's the basic license.
on the sporting license, you can own those 12 sporting guns, 3 common guns, but you can't own any hunting guns, or you can own hunting guns on a
You
sporting.
can you can own freely hunting guns with
Oh,
no
okay,
issues.
okay.
You cannot go hunting, but you can own hunting guns.
Okay. Okay, that
It's
makes sense. So so let's say you want to take your M91 Carcano out hunting. That's obviously on a sporting license, but if you went out and got your hunting license, could you take your Carcano out and hunt, boar or
yeah,
whatever? Okay,
yeah.
that makes
I
sense.
can I can have both licenses, one for sporting purposes, one for hunting purposes. I can have them together. And in fact, most of the hunting licenses most probably also have get the sporting licenses just to for
Yeah.
ease
So it sounds like the
because
sporting license is sort of like the most universal, easiest way to own hunting rifles, sporting rifles, and the 3 common limit. Now, so you were saying you have a different kind of a collecting license.
yeah, and that just allows you to get more than 3 common guns. So I have 4 pistols, and I need a collecting license to get more pistols. You know that kind of stuff.
How much
And
does it allow? How much does it allow you to get more of those common?
technically limitless, but you have to prove that you're getting different pistols for collecting purposes. Like you can get limitless like Lugers,
Okay,
but you have to show, oh, I got this Luger because it has this marking. Oh, I got this Luger because it has this manufacturer. It was from this manufacturer, and you
okay.
have to prove the police that you're actually collecting them and not just hoarding guns for the revolution.
So it's very similar to our Curio and Relics FFL, where you can acquire firearms that are 50 years or older, and it has to be for the implicit purpose of collecting and enhancing your collection. Um, so I think ours is pretty well defined, and they actually have a specific list of firearms that are collectible on a CNR license, which is kind of nice. Um, but it sounds like yours might license might be a little bit more subjective. Like I don't have to prove that, hey, I'm collecting uh, these Carcanos because this one has a different one. I can just kind of say, hey, I'm generally buying this to enhance my collection. So
uh, I know I don't really need to show the purposes of my collection. Like I have a Norinco 1911. I have a CZ 75. I have the Beretta. I have a Browning 1910, like an FN 1910. You know, different guns. I don't really need to have a collecting purpose. I just need to say, oh, there are different guns.
sure.
I'm collecting different guns for collecting purposes because I like them. I appreciate them, really easy.
No, I think that makes sense. There I've heard some countries in Europe that you need to explicitly say what you're collecting. Like, hey, I'm specifically going to collect Italian pistols, or you know a period of firearms between manufactured between 1900 and 1950. I know some states have those restrictions. So very quickly, what about bladed weapons like
So
bayonets?
that's another issue of Italy. The real big issue of Italy is that we have the that bayonets are actually controlled items are actually you actually have to register all the bayonets you have,
Really? Okay.
and you have to have a gun license to buy legally bayonets. There's not really a good reason for it, just because they're part of part of a gun. There are guns accessories, part of weapons of war. You know,
Yeah.
you can freely go into a shop here and buy kitchen knives, buy
On
a
any
machete.
license, pretty much,
Sorry,
or on any license, or do you need a
no,
specific license to buy bayonets?
no, and any license as
Okay.
far as I know,
So
because
a hunter, a hunting license, like say, hey, I need a bayonet to go with my Carcano. Something like
sort of no, just for it's just an extra step to
sure, vet you.
yeah, but it really is a nonsense because every single European country bayonets are absolutely not controlled. You can go over the border and freely buy a bayonet, but you cannot import it because that's a felony, and you cannot buy it because it's a felony, unless, of course, you go through the importing
Sure.
channels. And it's really annoying because you can go buying a machete.
Mosquito, yeah.
No, a machete.
Oh, machete.
That
Machete.
one. Yeah. Machete.
Machete, yeah.
Machete. Nah, I cannot pronounce it
No
at
worries.
all. And
Or like
you,
tools, tools that you would
yeah,
use in the garden or anything like that.
you can
Uh,
buy long blades. You can buy sort of everything, but you cannot buy a bayonet because it's
it's a
part of a
military
gun.
article. Yeah,
Yeah, it goes on a bayonet log. You cannot buy it officially, and also we have also a strict law about military blades, about long blades. Uh, it's a bit more complicated, but uh,
sure.
than that. But a machete has a purpose because it is a tool for gardening, so it's not strictly
Sure.
uh, a bludgeoned
Yeah,
weapon. It's not a weapon. It's
a
a
tool.
gardening tool.
Yeah,
It's a knife, a pocket knife. It's a tool to
do whatever you
get
need.
out in the woods. And but if you get caught from the police with a machete, with a pocket knife, you can get arrested because what's your purpose to go around with a blade, with a possibly with a weapon?
Sure.
It's a bit of a gray area, but we have to stay within the law boundaries. So bayonets are illegal until someone will get their shit together and legalize them.
No, that makes sense. What about other military articles like or even I don't think we touched on machine guns yet, or even things like suppressors or detachable magazines. I don't know if you guys have magazine restrictions or limits,
So let's start
25
with
rounds
magazines.
or
We sort of have a restriction because in the classification that we talk about, our profiles, when new guns are presented to them,
sure,
they also have the importer or the manufacturer that says, "Oh, this is a gun. This is a sporting gun, and since this is a sporting gun, it is it has a detachable magazine with 29 rounds, 30 rounds. It's we have a common use uh, that we that importers and manufacturers tend to don't go to not go over the 29 rounds,
yeah,
but some did with no issues. They said, "Oh no, yeah, this pistol is a sporting pistol. It has a 30 33 round magazine or something like that." But for common practice, they usually go around 29. They try to not go over 29 because, 30 rounds will be a terrible military gun, that kind of outlaw. But there is no really restriction on magazines, but you have to know the classification of your gun.
yeah,
If your sporting gun has a classification of 20 rounds, you cannot own a 30 round magazine. unless you own a gun that is classified for that 30 round magazine. It's
Understood.
it's crazy, but it's like that. And
And it's on you as the owner to know that, right? When you're
right,
preparing those articles.
yeah, and we have restrictions on magazines on common firearms and hunting firearms because of the European legislation.
Sure.
Those kind of firearms are limited to 10 rounds for the hunting rifles, for the rifles, long arms in general, and 20 rounds for the pistols. But sporting rifles and sporting pistols are exempted and can go with all the rounds they want for the sporting purposes, you know. So my AR-15 is for 29 rounds. My AK-47 is for 29 rounds. My L1A1 is for 20 rounds. You know,
And those are all sporting rifles, right?
yeah,
Okay.
those are all sporting rifles.
In theory, like if I wanted a like Draco AK with like a drum magazine that had, 100 rounds in it or 200 rounds, would that be possible under like a common license or, you know?
That will be possible if you manufacture a new kind of Draco AK-47, AK-74. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly what the Draco is, and you go to the Gardone Valtrompia proof house and you say, "Oh, I have this new gun. This is a sporting gun, and it goes with a 100 round magazine." Technically, they cannot deny you the 100 round drum magazine, but they're going to mm, complain. You know,
Right.
it's is it really a sporting purposes rifle? This one, it is short. It is with 100 round magazine. It's not really looking like a sporting purposes gun. So you're going to have some issues. It's
Sure.
not illegal. It's not illegal per se, but it's not recommended either. So
Sure.
up to you.
What about
And
what about like full auto in Italy?
so we could have machine guns up to the, well, I will say 1928, but it's a little more complicated than that because there is another license that is the weapons of war collecting license that basically go with all kind of destructive devices and the full auto machine guns. So it basically is not. It's a kind of license that is not released anymore. It it was uh, it was released up until the 1970s. Then there was a huge turmoil of terrorism here in Italy, so the government really restricted everything they could. So this who still have the weapons of war license can still have it. It is inheritable, so you can inherit both the license and the collection. You can there are probably 20, 50 people in Italy that have machine guns
Okay.
legally, but you cannot bring them to the range. You can just own them and preserve them and make a little museum in your house, basically.
Okay.
There are there are couple ranges that can allow you to use them, but it's basically military ranges. It's really complicated to use them, but you
So
can. Yeah,
if you were one of those people in the 1970s or one of those the last people to be issued what you said was a weapons of war license to own
yeah.
those, uh, you basically would just have it sitting in your house, um, and you would have to go through a lot of hoops just to use and fire this weapon. I'm thinking like if you I don't know if you could even have ammunition in your house for those weapons.
No, I don't think so. Technically, well, no, you can have the ammunition because you technically can have all the kind of ammunition that goes with weapons of war, but you cannot use them basically anywhere.
Right.
as far as I know, of course,
Right.
because
There's
I
probably
don't
some
know.
special. There's probably some if you got special permission from the government to do a military demonstration. I imagine that may be one of the few times you could, but even then, it probably wouldn't happen. So once all those people die out, those weapons are not grandfathered in anymore. They just will get either destroyed or sent to some museum, I imagine.
Yeah, my job is actually to take a look at some of the firearms that goes to that the police get from inheritances or from partisan stashes, and sometimes they come across my my desktop, and yeah, there are a lot of firearms that just got trashed, just got destroyed because nobody claims them and because nobody cares about them, so they just got destroyed. As I think it happens a lot of also in the United States. So yeah,
It's
same
yeah,
stuff.
it all depends on it really all depends on what state and jurisdiction. Some police departments will they'll um, auction off firearms. They'll either sell them to a local gun shop, but in a lot of cases they'll just destroy them or send them to some sort of disposal company or whatever. Um, so I think we talked about what kind of firearms that you can own generally, the different types of licenses. What are the requirements and restrictions to acquire a hunting and a sporting license? And then you went a little bit into the different, more niche licenses like the collecting and like the weapons of war license, which aren't issued anymore. Are there any other types of licenses that are uh, you said self-defense licenses are pretty difficult to get. Are there any other licenses that are like considered expired that you could never that aren't like available anymore, like that weapons of war license?
Not as far as I know. No,
Okay,
that's the weapons of war. It's the most important one. It's the biggest one. It
sure,
really is the you can have it all, everything you want, just to have this license. It's yeah, that's as far as you can go. And no, I don't think there is another kind of licensing for that. No, suppressors. We
okay.
we were talking about suppressors. Those are absolutely illegal here in Italy. You cannot own them under any circumstance,
Oh, really?
basically.
Interesting.
Yeah, as bayonets. Well, there are several European countries that are legalizing them. Who knows? Maybe one day, but
Yeah,
it's complicated mostly because it's the usual fat laws about suppressors are just for evil people, for killers, or just for mobsters. It's not really on top of our priorities.
sure.
It
What
will be
about
cool, but
yeah? What about what about other destructive devices? I imagine things like grenades or cannon ammunition or large caliber. You mentioned 50 BMG earlier.
yeah, as I said, 50 BMG is not strictly um, prohibited, but it is one of those calibers that when you go to the proof house, they look at you and they say, "No, that this is a military caliber. You
Yeah,
cannot." Yeah, the 50 BMG equivalent is not really going under the radar. So our barrets are 4.17 caliber, are a weird smallish caliber than 50 BMG. So you can own a barret, but
so
you can
yeah,
you
slightly.
don't own it in 50 BNG. That's it. And but other cannons, other stuff, you can technically own them, but they have to be somehow deactivated. It's a bit of gray area because again, uh, big cannons, artillery, nobody really has the ammunition for it.
Sure.
So technically, for museums can own them without big issues, and they don't really need to deactivate them technically, but they all deactivate them anyway because they want to be safe. And you can technically own them deactivated,
Sure.
but I don't really know if you need to deactivate all of them. I I have to check that.
Yeah.
It will be interesting because you can own technically mortars, grenade launchers. Grenade launchers, I'm quite certain that needs to be plugged some way, somehow, because they don't want you to have a destructive device around.
Like
But
if I got a tromboncino, uh, which there's probably a couple floating around in Italy,
yeah,
would that be more regulated than a hunting rifle?
no, it is regulated as a hunting rifle. It is um, not not really. Wait, it is not regulated because most of the tromboncino around are plugged. They have
Okay,
a pin, a metal pin inserted into them, welded into them, so you cannot insert a grenade technically. So you can own a tromboncino with ease, and you mostly have to own the. They usually sell the tromboncino with the TS carbine that comes with it, so
sure.
it's not really
Not
regulated because it's plugged.
yeah,
But I don't really know how the post-war tromboncinos are regulated because they're basically a tube to hold the grenade.
sure.
I have to check. I would have to check that too because I don't think that those are regulated nor plugged. I
Hmm.
have to check that.
Yeah, well, let us know what you find out. I think that would be that just came up. I was thinking of like the one Italian grenade launcher that I'm aware of. Um, so we talked about like uh so the different licenses, the sort of the cultural differences between rural and urban civilian firearms ownership, government regulation and storage, ammunition limits. Um, we talked a little bit about some of the historical factors that kind of shape the attitudes about firearms ownership. Is there, prior, you said it was kind of like early 1800s to basically the Second World War, there was a government, the government kind of encouraged civilian marksmanship. But prior to unification, that's probably a whole other messy situation with firearms ownership, just because you probably had different states and different governments that regulated them differently or fell under different different military orders.
Well, before the 1900s, really, there was no gun regulation anywhere,
Sure,
so nobody really cared about if you had a musket, if you had
sure,
whatever, because it was all flintlocks and black powder and shotguns. People really didn't care. It was useful to defend yourself against ferals, against bandits, against whatever. It was quite lawless here too. So it's a frontier, but without the frontier, without
sure,
the Indians. But you have your action between feral animals and bandits.
sure.
So nobody really care until the 1920s. But we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
So we actually have one of the biggest mass shooting in Italian history around 1911 that
okay,
was it was a really frustrated person that had several issues and several wrongs made against him that just went rogue, went postal, and and killed a lot of people in near Bergamo. Yes, is quite a known character. He
sure.
killed around 11 person, and it was basically most the biggest mass shooting made by a privately owned firearm, civilian owned firearm until ever.
Yeah, maybe up to
Yeah,
that.
we
Yeah,
no even later. Like we don't. we don't have
Oh, in
we
Italy
did
specifically.
yeah, we didn't have a mass shooting like that anymore since 1911.
Huh.
Because yeah, we had mass shootings, but it was terrorist attacks. So it's
Individual,
another
yeah, stuff.
yeah. We don't really have mass shooting as a civilian ownership. Mass shooting,
Yeah.
yeah, that's something. And by the way, the real regulation on firearm ownership came about in the 1920s with the fascist era,
Sure.
with Mussolini in power, and but it was common in most of European countries around that years. They started to tighten a little the regulation on firearms at small steps.
Yeah.
You could still own basically whatever. You just have to get a gun license. You cannot own weapons of war like the Carcano. You actually cannot own a Carcano up until the 1990s because it was a weapon of war. It was
Interesting.
used by the military, so we
Yeah.
cannot have them in an active state, active conditions up until the 1990s because there were weapons of war, and you cannot own weapons of war
That
unless
sounds
you have the
that
license.
sounds very similar to like I believe the French
Yeah,
law where you could not own like 8 millimeter label until they like 2006 when they're like, yeah, we should probably take this off the regulated, military caliber. But yeah, no, that's really
please.
interesting. In terms of like, I guess that's pretty common for most of Europe. Is there wasn't a lot of firearms regulation, maybe some in the 1920s and 30s, but it really didn't take off until the post-war era, where you start to see more urbanization, changing attitudes towards civilian firearms ownership. The reason I brought up kind of the early 1800s is because I know a lot of like UK like gun culture was kind of created out of this kind of threat that Napoleon was going to invade the United Kingdom. So there was a lot of encouragement of the government to have firearms clubs and for civilians to learn how to shoot, especially like militias around London popping up, and that kind of helped with civilian gun culture. Obviously, in the United States, you had a big frontier culture where kind of everyone had firearms, and then you also had a pretty strong firearms manufacturing, private government, but primarily private market for civilian, firearms production. I know Italy also has probably one of the strongest civilian firearms private industries in the world. I mean, you've got like Pedersoli, Beretta. I mean, you've got a lot of production base there. So I'm sure that also keeps the civilian you guys happy a little bit. But
Yeah, I'm quite sure that they're doing their best to lobby the government into not increasing our gun laws, but not so much. But yeah, we have quite the gun industry, both for our nation needs and for international needs, And the next step into Italian gun laws was in 1945, just to take that argument back. Uh, After the Germans were defeated, after Mussolini was killed, the Allied government rounded up the partisans and said, "Oh, give us back your guns, all of your guns. We know you have them. Give us back. Give back all of your guns. We don't want another possible civil war. We don't want revolutions. We don't want Soviet influence and the communist uprisings. So please give back all of your guns." So they had big roundabouts, big events, big public events in stadiums and such, and they just all the partisans in their formations orderly just gave the gun to, oh yes, this is my gun, and the war is over. Here are here are our guns. But of course, we all know that the partisans just gave the old muskets, old flintlocks, old batteries, all the carcanos, whatever bolt actions, broken bolt actions, and they kept all the machine guns, all the important guns for
Sure.
practical purposes. But yeah, the Allied government tried to tighten the gun control a little after a war literally littered the whole country with guns everywhere.
I
But
think
we
that's,
are, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
we still literally have hundreds of cellars and attics with guns hidden in walls. You know, partisans did their best to hide every gun stash everywhere, and we regularly have them found. Even today, I get them all the time. Police get find partisan stashes all the time. Really,
Yeah. I think that's
you
actually a really interesting part of the firearms history in Italy. I think it was kind of similar to like France, where you had a lot of communist partisans at post-war were kind of running around the countryside with weapons, and the French Republic was like, "No, we're going to disarm you because we don't want any sort of internal civil unrest."
turmoil.
Yeah, but it's kind of cool that you guys are finding those today, and hopefully there's some sort of movement to preserve those. I know you're kind of in that seat, but
Yeah, the really rare guns are. We try our best to preserve them.
yeah,
The most common ones, sadly, we cannot preserve tens of thousands of 1935 pistols. We do our best, but we cannot do everything,
sure,
because once they get into police hands, they are property of the state, and we don't really have the facilities to preserve all of them. We don't really have the museum warehouses to preserve all of them. So we try our best, really.
yeah,
But then the next step into in gun law, in gun control, really is the 1970s, 1960s, 1970s, when as I said before, when terrorism with the Red Brigades, the Brigaderos, black movements, fascist movements, placing bombs, killing people, kidnapping people all around. It was a really mess period in Italy, mess
messy,
mess time,
yeah,
messy time in Germany also with the RAF. It really the 1970s really are a messy time for all of Europe,
yeah, turmoil,
and
yes,
turmoil, terrorism attacks everywhere. So really, the Palestinians also. That one I said before, we had mass shooting from terrorism. The biggest mass shooting in Italian history, if I remember correctly, are Palestinians in the Rome airport. So yeah, it's a bit complicated, and that's the time when the government tried to uh, tighten control on guns everywhere,
sure,
except of course terrorists don't buy guns in the gun shops. They
sure,
just go to the parties and they know, oh, we know this. You still have some machine guns. Can you give it to us? Yeah, of course. And
sure,
they get it's. We have several historical accounts that terrorists had difficulties to get guns, but they could get guns. So you know, not the best guns, but World War II relics or Palestinians,
uh,
milsurps.
yeah, yeah. To cause political unrest, you've got to use what you've got to use or what's available to you. So, um, I know we're running a little bit short on time. I think my only, we kind of went over laws, culture, kind of the historical attitudes about firearms. You talked a little bit about, urban versus rural. Now, I guess the only other question I have is like, can you shoot on private land? Let's say you buy a farm out in northern Italy somewhere or central Italy big enough, can you just go set up a shooting range on your land, or does it need to be, obviously if there's like zoning restrictions, but or do you need to actually go to a shooting club in order to shoot like for
So
sporting purposes?
it's a bit complicated. Mostly, you have to go to a shooting range. If you don't
Okay,
want complications, you just go to a shooting range. There are both private and public ranges, both from the Tirosegno Nazionale, the national shooting range, and both from private owners of land that built a shooting range. They mm, declared this from to the police. Oh, I'm building a shooting range, a public shooting range, private but open to the public shooting range. Can I have the permit? And most of the times they have it. Mostly the private shooting ranges built into all caves, all the all mines,
sure,
both indoor and outdoors, but mostly in already polluted areas, already sterile areas, where lead isn't a big of an issue and where there aren't water sources to get polluted and such. But technically, you as a private person, if you have a piece of land far enough from other people, from other property, over other people properties, you can technically build a range with decent
like buffer
um,
or
yeah, with protection, with surrounding protection, so your bullets won't go
oh yeah, like
anywhere.
a berm and everything like that, into like a wall or like
Yeah,
that.
precisely.
Yeah,
Something like just a amount of dirt of ground, just a small hill. Um, you have to go, but you have to really go far enough away from another person properties and from also from another person from paths, mountain trails
sure.
and something like that. You have to be far away from basically every soul around so that you won't give alarm to people, want to give the false impression that you are either a poacher or
Yeah.
or a loony.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's probably local, I imagine like there's different like local zoning where, and here it's like most counties have like you can't shoot within 100 yards of a building or 200 yards of a building. You have to really be in a rural area where, and most people also, kind of get the consent of their neighbors to make sure that, they don't hear a bunch of gunfire and then call the police. But I get it all depends on what state you live in and what the attitudes towards firearms are.
Yeah, Italy is a bit more complicated because Italy has a really, really, really high density of population. So getting to a place where there is nobody around, it's quite complicated,
Yeah.
but it can be done. Yeah, it legally can be done. You can own your own private range, but you have to notify the police, of course, because you never know who's going to hear shooting and going to report them. But you can legally own your own private range. I know a couple of people who have their own private range in the mountains, but
So
you know,
in theory, I could go to my own like private range, bring an M1 Garand out while also eating Olive Garden, right? Or
yeah,
in your case, you might shoot into, a basket of Olive Garden, right? Just thinking of like
yeah,
the worst
probably.
American Italian brands.
Yeah, I hope to never taste it, or really, I hope to taste it just to see how does it taste. I saw some advertising from Olive Garden, and it looks really greasy, but
It is.
really greasy. That's bleh. We
That's part of the
I love
cultural.
grease.
That's part of the American cultural experience is greasy food. So
Yeah.
cool. Well, Diego, thank you so much for kind of giving us an overview of Italian firearms laws and culture. Obviously, you're a big Carcano collector. Tell us where we can find more information about, you know, Carcanos. I know you've got a new shiny website up.
Yeah, I made my my mission to have an English website available for American collectors with with
Without
the
the
new with a new wave of cavalry carbines that is flooding America. I had to make an English available website that is carcanorifle.weebly.com.
and I'll put a link in the description as well. And one last question before we leave. What is your favorite rifle to shoot?
So my favorite rifle to shoot is really complicated because
It sounds like
I
there's a
have
lot of complicated things.
I have I have a top three actually,
Yeah.
and in no specific order. I have the Austrian M95,
Okay.
the carbine, the 8x56 post-war version,
Yep.
the FAL because my L1A1 is astounding, and of
I'm
course I
jealous of
have
that one.
yeah, and it really is smooth. It really is smooth. You wouldn't believe that it is a 762, but it is really smooth. And of course I have my Carcano, but I really love my cavalry carbine because it's much fun. It's a lot of fun. It is just fun at the range.
Yeah, you can't beat
The Yeah, exactly. I really appreciate also my sporting guns like my AK and my AR, but they're just so easy to shoot. They're just so accurate. They're just so easy. I prefer some challenges and I prefer some heavyweight like my L1A1 and some challenges like the mule kicker of M95 and my short carbine, lovely carbine, my carbine.
Hmm. Well, Diego, thank you so much, and thank you for coming on the channel. And we'll definitely have you back on at some point. So thank you again, and we'll talk to you later.
I can't wait for another video like that, like this one. Thank you very much for having me in your show.